If I were to put a title on this, I would call it The Smokey Robinson I Know by Leon. I will start off by saying that neither Smokey nor Francis know that I am going to make a public statement. I purposely did not tell anyone because I didn't want to get a call from their lawyers stating, "Mr. Kennedy, it's better not to say anything. Let us handle this." In my personal opinion, lawyers are always extra cautious and they have their own way of doing things. And eventually they will win in the court system. But that might take 2 to 3 years. But in the meantime, there's a court of public opinion that is forming right now. And I cannot sit idly by while this atrocity is playing out publicly. To both sets of attorneys, I say that I take legal and moral responsibility for everything that I share and any comments that I am about to make. I first met Smokey when I was a 15-year-old kid disc jockey in Cleveland, Ohio. Smokey was already an international star and co-founder of Motown, second in command of that mighty empire. Well, that was 60 years ago. It was an instant bonding, and from there on in, I was known as Smokey's little brother. Smokey was best man when I married Jane. I was there for the birth of all of Smokey's children. I'm their uncle, and we've had a total history together throughout all of the decades. When Smokey was dying of COVID, I got a call from Francis saying Smokey's refusing to go to the hospital, and for good reason. Many people went into the hospital and they didn't come out. But Francis said, "Leon, you're the only one that can get him to go to the hospital because only in the hospital can they administer this special treatment that they want to give to him." I went by the house and I simply said, "Smokey, you've got to go to the hospital." "I don't want to go." I said, "You've got to go, and I'm not going to let anything happen to you." I rode in the back of the ambulance with Smokey, not caring that I was in close proximity, exposing myself to the deadly COVID. I say all this just to show that we have a history and that we're very close. The morning that the news broke about these sexual allegations, I was first alerted by my former wife, Jane, who called me stating, "Leon, have you seen or heard these accusations?" Which I had not. I immediately called Smokey's house and said, "Maureen and I are on our way over." When I got there, he was up in the room watching the press conference that was just getting started. I sat there with him. I saw his expressions, I heard his comments as this atrocity of a press conference played out. I will also say that throughout the day, calls were coming in from major stars and other people from all around the world, stating, "We know this cannot be true. And Smokey, we're here for you." So let me begin to break down these comments from my perspective, with things that I have seen and things that I do know. I will first say that I do not condone any type of violence upon anyone, but in particular upon women. And if I even thought that Smokey had done any semblance of these things, I would be the first to say, "Smokey, not only do you have to deal with the police, but we are going to get you some deep psychiatric help, because this is sick and utterly out of control." I've been in ministry now for over 20 years. And all I can say to you is that right is right and wrong is wrong, no matter who you are or what your status is. But in this case, I must say that the Smokey Robinson I have known for well over 60 years is incapable of doing what these people have alleged. They have depicted a scenario of a wild, crazed, animalistic human being, and that is the antithesis of the Smokey Robinson that I know, and for all the thousands of people that have met him and love him. I'm beginning to write my autobiography, and when I talk about Smokey, I say to people, if you ever want to meet one of the kindest, most laid back, the epitome of cool and love all wrapped into one, then do yourself a favor and meet Smokey Robinson. In show business, and I've been in it for a long time, over 60 years, I have seen many, and the nicest way that I can put it is arrogant buttholes. They've gotten way, way too carried away with their little bit of fame. However, Smokey has always been the opposite. He's always been overly gracious, having been a star since he was 18 years old, and yet you'd never know it. He's a very humble man. I can't tell you how many times we've been together eating, and in the middle of him putting his fork up to his mouth, somebody will come up and say, "Hey, Smoke, can I have an autograph?" And out of hundreds of times, not once has he ever said, "Can you come back after I finish eating?" No, he's always jumped up, given the autograph, taken a picture, hugged them, and shown them some love. I'll share another example. Last year when we were at the Kentucky Derby, Tina Knowles and Holly Robinson Peete were also in our party. And I mentioned this just to show what is a second nature to Smokey. We were sitting in the lobby waiting for Holly so that we could all be driven to the airport. And it was the type of elevator that's glass, so you can see who's on the elevator as it's coming down or going up. Well, Smokey was sitting in a position where he could see the elevator. My back was to it. But here's my point. All of a sudden, Smokey jumped up and started walking real fast to the elevator. I turned around to see what was happening, and here it was Holly in the elevator with 3 or 4 boxes that she was carrying. Smokey saw it and jumped up and was immediately trotting over to help her with the boxes. Now, I must say that security was standing right over there. He could simply have said to security, "Hey, will you go over there and help Holly with the boxes?" But he didn't do that. He jumped up himself and immediately helped Holly. Well, that's the kind of graciousness that Smokey has always exemplified. It exudes from him. So now, let's get into these allegations. I'll start by saying, with this Me Too culture, it's not just in Hollywood, but it's in all work environments and in society in general. Certainly men have taken advantage of women. In my own life, I know when men have tried to cross the line with Jane or with Maureen, when all they were trying to do was work as actresses. And I've had to straighten out several men that got out of line. However, we must also state that many women have been opportunists and have certainly used their looks and sexuality to get whatever they desired out of a life or career. So with this Me Too movement, I will say that certainly there are corrections or adjustments that need to be made, that need to be adhered to for justice. But usually when it comes to corrections, at the beginning of a corrective paradigm, the pendulum is always pushed too far in the opposite direction. And so it is with this Me Too movement. Now, too many men are found to be guilty upon accusation. Case in point, there are several men that I know wherein they were manipulatively and falsely accused of wrongful actions by women. These women simply stated, "I want 100,000 or 300,000 or more, and if I don't get it, I'm going to say ba 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 ba." And these men have gone to their attorneys, and after one adds it all up of how much the attorneys will cost to litigate and defend against these accusations, much less factor in all the turmoil, loss of reputation, loss of business, loss of career, or if you're in business, loss of corporate positions in the time that it takes the 2 to 3 years to get to trial to finally be found innocent. In the interim, all the damage has already been done. So the man and the attorney make strictly a business decision that it's cheaper and less destructive just to pay them off, even though their accusations are completely unfounded. And for those of you that are watching, believe me, this happens every week in this society that we now live in. It's strictly a cost of doing business. However, in this case, with these absurd amounts and accusations, and I'm going to start showing some of these accusations. Roll the tape.
The principal causes of action against Mr. Robinson, in particular, are sexual battery, assault, false imprisonment, gender violence, and creating a hostile work environment. Obviously, these ladies are identified in the lawsuit as Does, Jane Does 1 through 4. To protect their privacy, our clients, these 4 courageous women, want and demand justice for themselves. We're seeking damages of $50 million.
These attorneys stated that for what these women went through, they deserve justice. But what the attorneys did was an extortionist shakedown. Because you attorneys, you didn't go to the police first. No. You went to Smokey asking for $100 million. You were told no. Then you dropped it to $50 million. Then you dropped it to $20 million. And then you dropped it to $10 million. And then when you were still told no, then you went to the public. So now from 10 or 20, it's back up to $50 million. And to you attorneys, I must say, how much are you getting? Usually when attorneys take a case on a contingency, sometimes they get 18%, 20%, 25%. The good ones get 33 1/3%. I understand you're getting 50%. 50%. So let me ask, as I do a calculation on this, there's 4 Jane Does. Allegedly, they were raped repeatedly. The 4 of them can split up $25 million. There are 2 attorneys, and you get the same amount that the 4 women who were repeatedly raped would receive, and you weren't repeatedly raped. But you're demanding 50%. This is a shakedown of greed in the highest proportions. And there's got to be consequences. There's got to be consequences against you, the attorneys, and there's got to be consequences against these 4 Jane Does. Do all of you think that you can ruin a person's life? You can ruin a legacy and a reputation forever? And the way the system is set up now, you've got nothing to lose and a hell of a lot to gain. What I tell you, there are going to be consequences. And by the way, I don't know them as Jane Does 1 through 4. I know them as Sandy and Maria and Blanca and Brenda. I'm not going to say last names because I don't want to be accused of putting them in danger. It's amazing to me that in this day and age, individuals can bring serious charges against another individual. And in some instances, not in this one, but in other instances, the accused doesn't even know who the accuser is. They're just a Jane Doe. And in this case, the so-called Jane Does are hiding behind masks and sunglasses and wigs. Why are you hiding? The attorneys have stated to protect their privacy. That's why they're hiding. I'm wondering, is it to protect them from the ridicule of being looked at as atrocious liars that they so clearly appear to be? Roll the tape right here.
Let's talk about Jane Doe number 1. She worked for the Robinsons for a little over a year from January 2023 to February 24. Mr. Robinson first sexually assaulted and raped her in March of 23, as detailed in the complaint. What he would do was summons her to his blue bedroom, which you'll probably be hearing about later on. After having just showered, he would come out of the adjoining bathroom naked and proceed to force her to have sex with him against her will. He sexually assaulted and raped her in this manner 7 times.
So, Jane Doe was raped in this blue bedroom 7 times. Let me state that these women were not in the house singularly working. There were usually 2 or 3 working simultaneously.
Obviously, the women all worked together. Some of their shifts did overlap.
So there was always an overlap. So now, if you were raped in this blue bedroom 1 time, why would you go upstairs and stay upstairs and be alone with this man again if you think this is going to happen again? Wouldn't you go downstairs and stay away from him? Or say to one of the other maids, I need you to fix his lunch, or I need you to come up with me while I fix his lunch. Would you allow yourself to be in the same circumstance over and over and go through this same horrific deal 7 times? Would you not scream? Would you not holler? Would other people not hear you? Would you not allow yourself to be alone with him again and again and again, to be raped 7 times? To those that are listening to me, I say some things are just common sense. And so much of these stories play out as absurd. Roll the tape again.
Jane Doe number 2. She worked for the Robinsons from May 2014 to February 2020. Smokey Robinson's modus operandi was somewhat different with her. He would ask her to meet him in areas in the home where there were no cameras. There were 2 such places or areas in their Chatsworth home: the garage and the laundry room. When she would meet him at this location, he would immediately begin to sexually assault and rape her, causing her excruciating pain. He sexually assaulted and raped her in this manner 23 times.
So here we have Jane Doe 2. She says she was raped 23 times. That he took her to the garage and he took her to the laundry room where there were no cameras. So now let's put some common sense on this. Raped 23 times? You know an exact number. What did you do? Did you keep a diary? And if you had a diary of these horrific actions, could you just keep this to yourself for that long a period of time? Could you keep it to yourself for weeks, for months? No, you're saying you kept it to yourself for years. Or was she like a zombie going to that same exact area 23 times over and over again when people were still in the house? Wouldn't you avoid that area? Would you not just tell one of the other maids to go into that area and do whatever you were supposed to be needed for to do in that area? Or once again, you could have easily brought in another person to go in there with you. Or just simply say, no, I'm not going into that area ever again. And so I say, once again, these stories just do not add up, and they do not hold up. Roll the tape again.
Jane Doe number 3. She worked for the Robinsons as a housekeeper from February 2012 to April 2024. Her story is quite similar to the others. Mr. Robinson would call her into his blue bedroom where he would sexually assault and rape her. This occurred approximately 20 times.
So now here we have Jane Doe 3. She was raped 20 times. She was raped in the blue bedroom. And once again, I'm stating, are we supposed to believe that these women were like zombies going into the same area to repeat the same act over and over and over? It's just too far-fetched and too absurd to believe. The attorneys had some of these women leaving at different times, but to my recollection, they all left at the same time. This was a calculated, pre-planned conspiracy. Even to the point where Sandy, who had access to Frances's phone, deleted some of the personal information on herself before she made her exit. If these rapings had gone on for all these years, then why was it that Frances and Smokey were invited to their family weddings and birthday parties and quinceañeras? Would you invite this type of animal to be around your family or at a family gathering? Would you want him around you at all, other than just to have to show up to go to work because you had to be in this hellish environment, as the attorney said, to make a living? I don't think you would invite him to your family gatherings. And the other Jane Doe still goes to Smokey's concerts in Chicago and shows up for the meet and greets with her family members. And once again, I must wonder, why would you go out of your way and outside of the workplace that according to the attorney, you must do to make a living? Why would you go out of your way and bring your family to a concert to visit this monster? It makes no sense. And here's another incident that when it comes to human nature, it's very difficult for me to comprehend. When there was an opening for another position for a housekeeper, one of the Jane Does brought her sister in to fill the position. Common sense. If you're being raped repeatedly, why would you bring your sister into this hellish and dangerous atmosphere? Do you think we're all stupid? It makes no damn sense. And what also makes no sense is these sisters were not sharing these secrets with each other. So let's talk about keeping secrets. The scenario that the attorney painted was that there was 2 or 3 or 4 women that were working together, all being raped, but never speaking about it to anyone. For days, for weeks, for months, for years. I know human nature, and I don't believe that individuals can keep a horrific secret like that to themselves. You're working together, you're seeing each other every day, all day. Human nature would make a person act a little differently if they went through this horrific act. After going through something like this for the first time, much less multiple times, your whole demeanor would be different. Your demeanors would be different. And others would look at you saying, what's wrong with you? What's going on? You're telling me that all these women could keep this secret? But these attorneys and these women are all playing us to believe that they, all 4 of them, could individually keep such a horrific secret and hide the trauma of simultaneously being repeatedly raped. So in talking about the serious accusation of rape, for Smokey, those of you that know him, you know him as a gentle soul, a poet. And to rape someone, I think you have to be a special, sick, animalistic type of individual. I don't want to be overly graphic, but the attorneys were very graphic when they wrote out their report. So when it comes to rape, from the average man's point of view, much less from a gentle spirit like Smokey, to have a woman under you with fear and her body is frigid and tight, and certainly there's no reciprocation of passion. Her sexual juices are not flowing. Who would want that type of sex? Only a sick individual. And in a scenario like that, I doubt that the average man could even keep an erection up under that type of situation. And let's bear in mind that Smokey is now 85 years old. And so if this has taken place for the past decade, then he was in his mid-70s to now the mid-80s. And to be able to commit this type of act close to 50 times, I think it's absurd. As I stated, I'm making these comments from my own perspective, but I think it's important to share this one statement that Smokey made as we were sitting watching the attorney's press conference. When it was over, Smokey said, "Rape? That's such a violent, angry act. I've always believed that sex should be mutually consensual and mutually enjoyed. Why would I want that kind of energy? And beside, I would have to answer to God for that." Additionally, it's not as if Smokey is a man that is older and just confined to his house, and therefore this was the only outside of marriage sex that would be available to him. No, Smokey is still doing concerts all across the country. Every month he's out there doing concerts with audiences full of beautiful, adoring female fans. And maybe some of them would have liked to have an evening with Smokey. I say that to bring about some reality here, that Smokey sure has a lot of other options than raping these housekeepers. Once again, their stories make no sense. Now let's talk about this below minimum wage paying jobs nonsense that this lawyer was talking about. They could not afford to leave even though they were going through all this constant rapings. Well, I believe that Sandy owns 3 different pieces of property. That's always what I was led to believe. She could leave any time that she wanted. And the attorney went on to say, and I want to show the tape here.
They're Hispanic women who were employed as housekeepers by the Robinsons, earning below minimum wage. As low-wage workers in vulnerable positions, they lack the resources and options necessary to protect themselves from sexual assaults throughout their tenure as employees for the Robinsons.
The attorney stated, as low-wage earners, these women lack the resources and the options to protect themselves from these sexual assaults. Well, now, Mr. Attorney, you can't have it both ways. If they're only being paid a minimum wage, and it was an intolerable work situation, then it is a fact that in Southern California, one could obtain a minimum paying house position almost anywhere. Now, perhaps if one was paid thousands of dollars above the norm, then maybe one would put up with these repeated atrocities. Maybe you would have the mindset that it was worth the money. But even that's absurd. But you expecting us to believe that one's going to put up with being raped 7 times, another one 20 times, another one 23 times, just to keep a minimum wage paying job? Then I think that you think that we are Bozo the Clown to believe this type of absurdity.
Jane Doe number 4. She worked the longest as the housekeeper for the Robinsons. From October 20, 2006 to April 2024. He raped her in 3 of their homes, namely the Chatsworth home, the Las Vegas home, and the Bell Canyon homes.
Additionally, when I and others frequented the house, we saw individuals that were cheerful and humming and singing. We did not see fear or depression or someone that seemed traumatized. As I've stated, I've been in ministry now for over 25 years. And in ministry throughout these many years, I have counseled, I have prayed with, sometimes cried with women and men that have been raped or in some form molested or sexually shamed. And we've had to deal with the lingering effects, the issues, and the residue that's been brought about by such vile acts. And yet, When I'd go over to Smokey and Francis's house, as stated previously, I always saw a cheerful demeanor with these ladies. I did not see effects of trauma or sullenness or intimidation or domination. I don't think these women were capable of being such great actors that they could have continuously faked a calm demeanor or cheerfulness week after week, month after month, much less year after year. I want to talk to the attorneys. As for these attorneys, I understand that at least one of you is in the organization 100 Black Men. And for those of you listening that are not familiar with this organization, it is a very prestigious organization of black men that help individuals in a variety of ways. And this organization has done an outstanding job for many decades. But I must now state that I have received calls from some members of this organization stating that they are very, very disgruntled with you attorneys and this case. And I'm not going to put words into their mouth, but I will say it bluntly myself. What kind of black man are you to take on such an absurd, full of ridiculous lies for a case like this against another black man? And we don't have a lot of them. One who is one of our national treasures, Smokey, who has worked hard for decades to lead an exemplary life and is the epitome of professionalism. And you're going to take on a case like this. As a black man and as a professional attorney, I say you ought to be ashamed of yourselves. And I am declaring that you crossed the line professionally when you stated that Smokey Robinson is a serial rapist, a serial predator. Your clients did not say that. You said that.
We believe that Mr. Robinson is a serial and sick rapist that must be stopped.
It's coming personally from you. You crossed the line, and I am really asking Smokey and his attorney to sue you personally. There have to be consequences for you to make that type of statement regarding an individual who does not have a history of wrongdoing. Now, I'm going to tell it like it is. This was a big payday for all of you. If these women were horrendously raped multiple times, then there should be justice. And that justice should have been to immediately go to the police and the DA and file charges against these atrocities. But you did not choose to do that. You chose to have a big, big payday.
Yeah, well, could you restate what you're asking for in terms of monetary relief? What are you seeking?
Well, $50 million.
And how did you determine that amount?
It's just we wanted to get his attention, hence a big number.
Will they file complaints with the police as well so that they can investigate this as a criminal matter?
We have not been contacted by the district attorney's office yet. Obviously, we're more than happy to cooperate as best we can.
Does a police report though have to be filed by the women in order for the DA to then proceed?
Well, again, no police reports have been filed by our clients as of yet, given their fear of having done so.
But where do you stand on that? Do you want your clients to file a police report now that they've retained you?
I think that's something that we need to discuss with our clients before we cross that path.
Because based on the disturbing allegations, don't you feel like this is something that law enforcement should investigate?
So let me break it down from my perspective. This was an atrocious shakedown. Everyone was going to get a payday and have a great exit strategy for the rest of their life. Sandy's husband, and I know him, and I know his name, but I won't mention his name, has been ill. She had already stated that she wanted to go back to Guatemala and retire. And with this amount of money that she thinks she can get, she could do that. The other three, who are illegal immigrants, are afraid that any day they might get deported. So they need a big payday so that they can either stay here or be deported with a whole lot of money. And you two attorneys, well, you'll have enough money for a very nice retirement. That's the sting if it goes your way, but it won't. It's also been brought to my attention something regarding the U visa. I'm still investigating this, but I've been told that if an illegal states that they were the victim of sexual abuse, with this U visa, it can make them eligible for a pathway to permanent residency if you're stating that you're the victim of sex abuse. I wonder if that's another card that these women are trying to play.
They worked 60 hours a week. They never got paid overtime. They were chastised by Miss Robinson if they tried to eat, if they tried to take breaks. And that's part of the allegation. Just the employer-employee relationship, they violated, we have alleged, numerous labor laws. All the labor code violations are against her as well.
I think the intentional infliction of
And the
emotional
intentional
distress,
infliction of emotional distress.
hostile work environment as well.
Well, we believe that there was some knowledge of prior misconduct of a sexual nature against other individuals against him. And we're alleging that she was aware of that and she took no preventive action.
Let me make some comments about the workplace. These attorneys made it sound like the Robinson household was this dark atmosphere, that these women were not allowed to take breaks, that they worked 60 hours a week and were not given any overtime. They were not allowed to take time to eat or have breaks, even talked about false imprisonment. Let me tell you, as one that is over there quite frequently, nothing could be further from the truth. Anybody that's ever been over to that house will testify it was always a peaceful atmosphere, a cheerful atmosphere. Let's break this down. How labor intensive could it be? There were always 2 or 3 maids there. And at this house, how cluttered, how dirty could it be? It was only 2 adults. It was not like a family of 5 or 6 family members and kids and cluttering up a house. There was no clutter. The house always looked like a 5-star hotel. Smokey and Francis were the only 2 people that lived there. And they didn't even use most of the rooms. They basically congregated in about 4 rooms. And they were seldom there. Smokey's on the road. And when he's home, he's on the golf course 2 or 3 times a week. He's doing his radio show. He's in meetings. He's in the studio. Most days he's gone and only comes home toward the end of the day. And Frances, too, is usually out doing her running around during the day and comes home in the evening. So what I'm saying here is that there was no intense or strict labor. I'm also saying that these ladies were treated like family. When it came to eating, they fixed themselves whatever they wanted. And certainly they had breaks. And in the refrigerator, there were things in the refrigerator that was just for them. I would see steaks in the refrigerator. Smokey doesn't eat red meat. I bring that up because the steaks were for Sandy. Frances would buy them because Sandy liked them. And Frances would treat the other ladies to In-N-Out burgers once a week because they loved In-N-Out burgers. Both Smokey and Frances were always incredibly generous to these people. As I said, they treated them like family. Overtime? Well, let me tell you about perks. When one of Sandy's family members had a car accident, Sandy was out for close to 6 weeks. Frances never even docked her, still paid her for every day, even though she wasn't there. The Robinsons have a home in Vegas, and there are times when Frances and Sandy were in one of the casinos where Smokey was performing, and Frances would literally give $100 bills to Sandy to gamble with. Frances would pay Sandy extra $200 to $300 to curl her hair. Times when they'd go out and Frances would always stop someplace to have lunch, like a Neiman Marcus to have lunch and other places to have lunch. She didn't have Sandy wait in the car. She always treated Sandy just like an equal and had Sandy sit there with her and treated her to lunch, treated her like family. I have pictures of Sandy with Frances and Frances's daughters in Cabo. Sandy was treated to this vacation for her birthday. I've got pictures of Sandy on jet skis and happy laying out in her own private villa that Francis paid for, getting facials and massages on the beach that Francis treated her to. This doesn't sound like slave labor to me. How dare you, attorneys, come up with these atrocious undertakings just for a payday? Smokey and Francis are very generous individuals. With Sandy in particular, this I do know. She was treated like a family member. Now, I give Sandy credit. She was there for Francis when Francis broke her ankle and when Francis had surgery. But in turn, Francis treated Sandy like family. I know for a fact that when Francis was sitting down going through her trust, Sandy was put in the will. There were times when her personal or family, for whatever reason, Sandy had to take off. And as I said, she was never docked. Sandy was given over $6,000, this I do know, to help her with her teeth. And I remember when Francis was about to write a check and Sandy said, "Oh, no, can you just give me cash? I don't want my husband to be embarrassed that I have this type of money that you're giving me." Sandy was given, and I do mean given, money to use as a down payment for her car. And by that I mean thousands of dollars as a down payment. When Sandy was perplexed that someone in her family was going to get married in Hawaii, and she was complaining, "Why do these young people always pick these far-off exotic places? It's so expensive to go to Hawaii." Francis said, "Don't worry about it, Sandy. I'll pay for your hotel. I'll pay for your plane fare." Does this sound like people that were abused? It's ridiculous. And they all ought to be ashamed of what they have tried to do and get away with. Francis trusted Sandy so much that Sandy even had access to the safe. Atrocities? To me, it was the opposite of what was stated. I think that the Robinsons trusted them too much and gave them too much familiarity and privilege. Regarding Francis, I've already talked about the work environment. I've already stated that she was very generous. But for these attorneys to state that Francis knew that Smokey was repeatedly raping these women and never said or did anything about it, more or less implying that she went along with it, that is a lie from the pit of hell. Francis is a spirit-filled, praying woman, and she has a healthy fear and reverence when it comes to God and when it comes to what's right and what's wrong. And she would have never, ever tolerated those type of actions. To those of you watching this, I've laid out what I've said. I've laid out what I've seen and know. And I've stated my conclusions. I want to know, what do you think? What are your comments? Let me know. And God bless you.